Attention recruiters, Sourcewhale has exciting news. Starting July 30th, you can try 2 powerful new AI tools for free. Inbox Agent is like an assistant in your inbox, drafting replies in your voice and automating follow-ups. Notetaker joins your calls, transcribes everything, and instantly creates AI-powered summaries that are automatically logged into your CRM. That means Sourcewhale handles the busy work while you focus on placements. Don't wait. Head to sourcewhale.com/free-trial to start your free trial. Coming up on this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast.
I just want to say that I think recruitment has been the greatest personal development opportunity that I've ever had. And it's really critical that you elevate yourself and the value that you add, because playing from a level 10, the give-get and the influence that you have is so much different from playing from a level 2, 3, or 4.
Welcome to the Elite Recruiter Podcast with your host, Benjamin Mena, where we focus on what it takes to win in the recruiting game. We cover it all from sales, marketing, mindset, money, leadership, and placements.
I'm so excited about this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast because we're going to talk about how to build that $1 million desk. We're going to talk about the things, the shifts in identity, the shifts in the processes, the shifts in everything that you need to do for you to hit that $1 million desk. And here's the thing, like most recruiters never touch it, never get close. It's more than 99% of recruiters do not hit that $1 million per year desk. So I'm so excited about the guest today who's going to share how he did it, the things that he had to do, the differences that he had to make it happen. So welcome to the podcast, Pree.
Thank you so much, Ben. Big fan of the show. Very excited to be here.
It's so awesome that we get the chance to chat. I know we got a chance to meet in person twice, and the conversations just kind of are leading up to this podcast interview.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Pree, before we get started, quick 30 seconds about yourself for all the listeners.
Based in Australia, started out in tech sales, then into leadership, redundancy, built a $1 million desk. It's more now, but have just been a big fan of process, identity, and making the shifts, going 10x time after time that will help you build the life that you want and the desk that you want.
So I'm excited about this. And, it's the $1 million question. I know this isn't the original career that you started off in. So let's talk about that. How did you even end up in this land of misfit toys?
Love that. Misfit toys. So true. The GFC, I was in my dream job as the head of country sales with a team of 23 sales reps and 2 sales managers in Australia. I thought, everything I wanted at that point professionally I had. And then they cut the division and 200 jobs went. So I had 2 kids under 5, a new mortgage, and by choice we're a single income family at the time. And there wasn't anywhere else to go to immediately. So I had to put food on the table and started consulting and found my way into recruitment.
Wait. So you were in your dream job, you were happy, and then you got hit with a layoff. And how did consulting turn into recruiting?
Great question. I was at a breakfast once sitting with this person. He owned 3 businesses and he said, "You seem really excited about sales and sales management." And I said, "Yeah, so he said, "Why don't you come and help me? My business is stuck in the 80s back then. So, old school business, we need transformation, modernization. Will you come and spend some time with me?" And so I did. And that started with consulting. But I noticed that the main problem in this, $5 to $10 million business was the people. It was their salespeople. And that's something that I knew natively, meaning I'd been a sales rep for 7 years. I'd been a sales manager and managing sales managers for 7 years. So 14 years. I said, I know how to recruit people. I know how to recognize, engage, and recruit these people. So that's how I started recruiting for them. And then that became a problem everyone else. I started seeing the blue car that I was wanting to buy everywhere.
Okay. So did you start technically with that company, or is this literally the launch of your business?
And that was the launch of my business. I haven't been an employed recruiter ever. So I am the perfect corporate escapee, not by choice, but I've been pushed into this and I've got to feed my family and I've got a mortgage to pay. I actually, Ben, I remember today, I wrote to the bank saying I did not have enough money for my mortgage and it was called a mortgage holiday. I asked for 6 months. They gave me 4 months and I had to figure out real quick where that money was going to come from come month 5.
So you realize this was a problem. You were consulting in there. Like, this is going to sound stupid, but like you worked for some large companies, so you had this infrastructure on how to bring people in. Like, it wasn't something that you had to go figure out. Like, how did you start to learn this business, or is it just on the fly? Just like, okay, I'll help you here. I'll help you here. Like, what did you do?
Yeah. So I used to be a sales manager and also was the sales trainer because they didn't have budget for 2 heads. I was the sales manager and sales trainer. And basically I had learned from very early on that I could go take something that was hard and make it easy by building a step-by-step process in 3 to 7 steps. And that was the genesis of my idea around consulting. So if I can do a diagnostic around their planning, process, people, and performance, these 4 areas, I can charge them a fee and put some food on the table for my kids, right? So I think $350 an hour back then, I'd find these gigs for, 10, 20 hours and fix problems for companies. And people loved it, but it wasn't sustainable. So they were nice little, $3,000 to $5,000, $7,000 hits, but I needed more regular work. And when I saw how much they were willing to pay for recruitment, I was like, I'm in the wrong business. I've got to become a recruiter.
So did you actually during these deep dives in these companies, did you see some of the checks they were paying recruiters?
Yes. So these were small businesses, right? These were, $5 to $10 million companies, 20 to 30 people. And I'd basically do an assessment and I'd get paid $1,000 or $2,000 to figure out their revenue strategy. But they were paying $20,000 checks to recruiters. And I was like, heck, A, I'm in the wrong business. And B, I understand the person that they're trying to hire really, really well. And as a hiring manager with 23 reps, I was recruiting every month of the year. So basically it was like, I've got this, I know how to do it. But actually there was so much I didn't, but that was the initial misguided, confidence. But sometimes confidence will take you places where, capability won't.
Well, I mean, that confidence is definitely taking you down an exciting road. So as you started to figure this out, hey, you know what? The recruiters are making way more money than me. This looks way more sustainable, way more doable. When was your first true recruiting client and recruiting check? How'd you get that one? Was it just a flip of one of your customers?
Yes, it was with my existing customer. They weren't happy with whom they were getting. And I basically said, let me do that for you. And that was the beginning. And then I had to figure out how to go and find these people. So I didn't know anything at the time other than putting up a job ad, and then had to figure out everything else in terms of how to headhunt people. So I definitely maybe took a lot longer in the beginning, my first few years. But as long as there was enough to pay my mortgage, send my kids to school, I had the luxury of figuring things out over a period of time. So, yeah.
So you spent a few years just kind of grinding, figuring out. When did you start actually turning on the learning about the industry?
I think it was my first recruitment assignment, I think was within 3 to 4 months, right? Where I went from, I doubled my business by going from 1 client to 2 clients, right? So I started looking for more recruiting clients. But in truth, I think for my first year, I billed maybe 52,000, but my second year, I billed 250,000. And that was combined with consulting and some training and recruiting. At which point I decided I was going to let go of the consulting and training, because this is the key point around building $1 million desk. You have to let go of 80% that doesn't lead to where you want to go. And you've got to choose the 20% that takes you towards what you want in the next 3 to 5 years. So I may not be a lot of things, but I would say I am fairly intentional about what do I want in the next 3 to 5 years. You can call it a dreamer, a visionary, or whatever, but basically I'm always filtering everything today saying, how is this serving the future that I'm trying to get to?
Well, let's take a step back. Like that second year of the 252,000, which great growth from, not knowing anything to doing that. When you're sitting down and looking at everything and you're like, 80-20, like I need to focus on the 20%. I need to get rid of 80%. At that point in time, like what was that 20% that was actually making the difference?
It always has and always will be, wait for it, business development. You can get someone else
Dirty word.
Yes, that's right. BD, right? More BD, the cure to all problems in life as a recruiter.
That's true. And it's one of those things, like I see a lot of people throughout time, like, it's BD is just like, it's one of the harder parts of recruiting sometimes, or most of the time. So like a lot of people fill up their day or their desk with all these other things. When did you actually just start like offloading everything else so that way you could become that BD specialist?
Yeah. So I'll go back to a question that I didn't completely answer, is that when I started finding roles that were challenging to fill, obviously every problem makes you ask new questions of yourself, right? How do I find this person? Where does this person exist? How do I get to them? And so that's where the need for learning begins. And I used to follow Mark Whitby and his Big Biller podcast at the time, and whatever I could get, I couldn't afford at times a coaching session, but I could at least buy the, $100 Big Biller session with 8 episodes. And today we've got, the Elite Recruiter podcast. I wish I had that back then, but long story short, it was just unstructured learning, immersing, taking, 2 or 3 things out of every session that I listened to, and just continuously trying to get better every week. Because something that I learned early in my sales career was this, is that if you look after the numbers will look after you. That was actually one of the first things my sales manager told me.
If you look after the numbers, break that down. What does that actually mean?
So
especially for us recruiters.
Yes, simplistically, it sounds like volume, but basically every day, whether, I hope we're not a 9 to 9 recruiter, though some are. If you're a 9 to 5 recruiter, the numbers are the things that you're doing. So for example, if you look after the BD outreach every day, you're going to have fewer feast and famine months. But if you spend all your time recruiting, you are going to have feast and famine. I've had full quarters where I've blanked out, right? 4 big deals all fell through early stage. So I realized that at the end of the day, the only thing that I can control, I can't control candidates. I can't control clients beyond a point, but I can control how many people I reach out to, the conversations I have, what action am I responding to, what signals am I looking for, how do I win or lose a job at the job intake, not at the candidate offer stage. Most jobs are won and lost at the intake stage, depending upon your ability to get both a, exclusive, trusted relationship with the hiring manager, right? So look after the numbers. So that can mean just BD, but it can also mean the number of LinkedIn posts that you do. If you look at my profile, I'm very intentional about making LinkedIn posts that engage with my target audience, which is senior VPs of SaaS companies, right? So that's another number. I look at, we grade jobs A, B, C. A is exclusive with hiring managers, whereas C is multiple recruiters only working with talent, right? So if you get good with the numbers and are doing the right numbers first in the day, you're going to have a healthier desk. So
I love that. Good breakdown. I couldn't let you get away without digging deeper on that. So you started growing, you started learning. When was the point that you actually was just like, hey, I need help. I need to grow?
Yeah. I think that if we break it down into 3 distinct phases, that it's not a one time, but we kind of go through. Phase 1 is survival. Phase 2 is sustainable. And phase 3 is scalable, right? So number one, stage 1 is survival. Should I go and apply for another job? And that quarter where I had, 4 deals worth 120,000, 30,000 piece, when that fell through, I literally didn't have anything in the bank. And I was like, maybe I should go and look for a sales VP job. That's what I was, right? That was in year two. I've had one moment in 15 years where I said, maybe I should go get a job because this is just extremely volatile. It's depressing. Survival. I think when we got,
let's pause right there. Yep. Let's pause on the survival thing. Because there's, over the last few years, it's not been the easiest market for everybody. So you saw the opportunity. You saw what recruiting could possibly do. But you just had everything blanking out for months on end. You're sitting there having this internal dialogue and this internal debate. How did recruiting still win during that?
That's good. So I'll say this again and again. When in doubt, zoom out, right? When you are overwhelmed, you're usually hugging a tree. That's the problem, rather than looking at the forest, which is everything else. So what do I want? I want to build a lifestyle of freedom and flexibility that supports my family, that I can do what I want, when I want, where I want, with whom I want. That's the dream that we're working towards, right? But that's the big picture. And going back to getting another job didn't take me there. So I had to succeed. I have to survive, not only for myself, but my kids, my future self in that. So to do that, I need to say, okay, I don't get to escape this problem, because I can't tell you, this was not just year 2. Recruiting is a roller coaster, but you need to build layers of redundancy, meaning I'm solving a problem now for a team of 8, not for a team of 1. I've solved the 1-person problem, right? So, when you're in the 1.5 to 2.5 million billings, it's a different issue from a $100,000 to a $300,000 billings. But basically, the volatility also reduces. So I'll come back to that. Survival. I just, when in doubt, zoom out. I want to make this work. I need to make this work. So I have to make this work, which means I've got to go and find new jobs. I've blanked out. I've got to, use the credit card. And I didn't borrow money from anyone. So it was 2 credit cards and just month to month, week by week, day by day, looking at when that check comes in and when I can delay payments. I've paid a lot of interest payments, far too many to stay alive. But then that has allowed me to even have, if I didn't get that at the 100,000 level, I wouldn't have had the million level, right? So you've got to figure out how to survive, but take action. So survival is step 1. And in that survival, you're managing the numbers, right? It's easier to recruit on a live job. It's harder to sit and make, 30, 40 cold calls every day. So I wouldn't get my coffee until I had made 10 cold calls. I wouldn't start recruiting until I'd made my 30 cold. It's just little games. I learned this from Scott Love, and I was so excited to see him in Vegas at the Pinnacle conference. And I said, Scott, I held him with his hands with both hands. I said, Scott, I have had the benefit of so much free coaching from things I've learned listening to you. So thank you. But yeah, that's how you just survive.
And when did you start transitioning to the next phase?
Yeah, I think that basically, if you're willing to do more of what worked, less of what didn't work, you're going to have another month. So I think that rather than just throwing my hands up, I had to keep figuring things out, from trying to speak at small business events, going to the local business chamber, to doing mail outs with, at the time it had, hard-boiled confectionery. And there was some cheesy message about making that next year sweeter. And people said that it arrived in the mail with ants. I followed up and I called this prospect, I sent you a mail about making the next month or year sweeter. And he's like, yeah, I got that in the mail with ants in the envelope. But you know what? You got to try stuff. And at the end, do less of what doesn't work. until, you go from one job to three jobs to maybe one client and three clients. And, so it's the big picture of survival, sustainability, and scalability. But then within that, okay, I've got a whole bunch of 15 different jobs. What do I want to specialize in? So I went from specializing in, so that's how you start finding your niche. I didn't leave a previous recruitment agency with 100 relationships and start my own. So I've taken a much longer route to figuring this out, but it's changed who I am, because literally you can throw me a problem and I will try and figure it out how to come back and solve it.
So like around that time period, going from like one survival to the next phase is when you started figuring out the niche.
That's right. And I found that when I had conversations with sales managers, for starters, that they're like, you understand exactly what I do, right? So identity, the first thing that I had to do was from, do you have a job, calling around asking for job orders, to understanding, hey, you know what? I'm an experienced sales VP who has run a $20 million business. So when I call these guys, I'm not going to behave like some, rookie recruiter who's just trying to survive. I'm going to speak to them at the same level. And, again, shout out to Scott Love, about really getting your identity. Who are you and what's the value that you bring? And being able to get that in 30 seconds. And I'll tell you what I said. I said, hi, Ben, we haven't spoken before. My name is Pree. I'm one of the rare few recruiters who used to be an account exec, then a sales manager, and now I recruit salespeople. And they're like, I see what, So you got to get through quickly about who you are. And, I'm not the next guy. I am the guy who used to do the job. I was the candidate. I was the hiring manager. Now I'm the recruiter. Now try and beat that in terms of the 20 voicemails from other recruiters.
I can see that. During that time period before you figured out your niche was going to be like salespeople, did you get jobs focusing on other things?
Yes.
And as you started narrowing down on your niche, did you have to start saying no to those?
Very hard. Yes, absolutely. Even if somebody was going to pay me to say no to my client who was going to pay me $3,000 to come and just give them some advice with no implementation, it's very hard to say no to good money where people, want your advice. So yes, but I knew that between that $2,000 consulting check and the $20,000 recruiting fee, I knew which one I would choose and which was getting me to my next stage. So essentially I went from, year 2 was 250, year 3 was 320, year 4 was 450, year 5 was 560. And by then I had gotten another person with me. I stopped pinching myself like, this is real, this is actually working. I think somewhere between the 300 to, and this is real. So it took years for it to catch up. Like, I am actually a business owner, and along the way, continuously refine. I think by nature, I'm a continuous learner. So I found that, salespeople, and then within salespeople, I found that some industries were going down the drain, because at that time I was general, to the tech industry where, there was continuous investment and innovation. And having lived and worked in the US as an account exec for an Oracle consulting partner, I kind of used that. So I then started saying, one of the rare few recruiters who's been an AE and a sales manager with an Oracle consult, and you say Oracle consulting partner, they're like, oh, okay, I understand. You understand exactly the pain I'm going through, right? So that was my shift from all sales, all industries to sales in tech. And so
love that.
Started then getting a lot more yeses, but that may be 100 calls, and now I'm getting 5 yeses instead of 1 or 2, right? But that compounds. So it was, I think you then get out, and then the question became, I've got my calendar booked from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. On weekends, I still have jobs to recruit on, and I can't wait for my wife to go out with the kids so that I can get some work done without getting into trouble, and I'm constantly wired. I'm thinking about this when I go, wake up in the middle of the night, I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, okay, this is unhealthy. I have got to figure a way out to go to the next stage. We have been now sustainable let's say, after year 2.5, 3. So that's when I made my next shift into,
I love that. So the next shift is sustainability.
yes.
The numbers started being real. You had to pinch yourself and be like, oh crap, I actually have a business. I am now going from just like the solo operator to I own something.
That's right.
Like, what were some of the things that like you started doing? That was like your first hire, right? It was around this time.
That was around when, so I went from, I'm solo, I'm sustainable, I can see this working, but having seen myself successfully operating with larger teams at a larger level, I was like, I know I can do more. So step one was to then reduce my risk through delegation. So when I say reducing your risk through delegation to increasing sustainability, what I mean by that is actually I found that if I was recruiting on one job and I placed one candidate, but I called 35 candidates, there were 34 people that immediately, unless I could MPC them out, I didn't get any benefit from that, meaning I couldn't use that immediately to convert into revenue. So what I did was I got my first recruiter to basically do the candidate side for me. And that's what I'd started hearing from a very few back then, very few recruiters talking about, the two-headed recruiter. But that immediately opened up 6 hours a day where I was not recruiting. So it took time. Everything is hard to find. I feel like I've done everything wrong the first time around, but then you suck less as you go along if you're learning and are willing to try.
That is so true. I think that's really like one of the differences though that I've seen between like some of these top billers and the recruiter that's still average. It's like hey, I'm going to suck, but I'm going to keep on sucking and I'm going to go through more sucking. And then I'm learning as I'm sucking. And then I'm taking that learning to the next step.
Yeah. So that's where, literally I can say every first, second, even third attempt at getting a function, let's say I break down today and I'll go backwards. I break recruitment down into 4 functions. One is client acquisition. Number 2 is client management or account management. Number 3 is candidate recruiting. That's the phone aspect. And number 4 is candidate resourcing. That's the building the list. So identifying who are the most relevant people to call for this search. 4 aspects, right? So in the beginning, I split that into 2. I was client acquisition and client management, and I got someone to build the list and make the calls. And that took us from a 450 to a 750 very quickly. I wish I had done that much earlier, but maybe I'm a slow learner. But within, I'd say, a year and a half or 2, that was the fastest jump that we made back then. So we were profitable. I was spending time with clients. I had someone spending time recruiting and resourcing, and that was the next shift. So that's when we now started having a profitable and sustainable desk where, my goal is, do we have 3, 6, 9, 12 months of operating income, right? So those are yardsticks for, if you have less than 3 months of operating income, you're in red. If you've got more than 6 months, you're, in yellow. If you've got more than 1 year, you're in green. So today we're in green.
So like when you're sitting there talking about this, you're talking about having enough like operating income in the bank to sustain you guys for a year, if need be. How many other recruiting firms out there are even talking about this? Like these yardsticks of keeping your business safe for no matter what can possibly happen while still operating the business.
Yeah. I don't hear too many people doing it. Let me just say this, that I don't have it all together, but when things go wrong, by nature, if I'm nothing else, I'm a problem solver, regardless of the situation. So it's more looking back saying that quarter where those 4 deals fell and I had nothing in the bank and I paid a ton in credit card fees, I don't want to do that again. right? I don't want to do that again. So to avoid that situation, the next time I want to make sure that I don't just have 4 and I'm just doing everything. I'm doing the client side, somebody's doing the candidate side. That's the first shift so that you can get candidates at scale. Number 2, I need to figure out how do I at least have 3 months of cash flow so that, I'm not waking up in this, horror story that I've built for myself every other night, because it feels like that. It's like, I don't have enough cash, right? How am I going to pay for this? How am I going to pay for that? And a lot of people live in that space. So those yardsticks, getting to 3 months cash flow, because anyway, from the time you get a job, mine is 100% contingent perm business. So, from the moment I get a job, I'm at least 90 days away to cash. So I don't think that, having 90 days of cash, you've made it. I think you're just still in survival mode. I think if you got 6 months plus, then you've earned the right to blank out for 1 quarter, right? And if you've got 12 months plus, well, you know what? That's how we made it through COVID, right? We did have some government help, but I was able to keep my team of 4 through COVID without, so I'm just saying there's lots of struggles and survival seasons that I've gone through. Sometimes I feel like 8 out of 12 months a year, you're kind of getting to the brink of survival as well. So it's not like I've made it, I'm just saying that, but you keep pushing from survival to sustainable, and then from sustainability, scalability. Okay, so, now I've got at least 6 months worth, 3 to 6 months worth, or even if I have 3 months worth, and you need to if you've got 3 months worth, get yourself someone to do the candidate side, number 1, right? And this is now me just giving advice. And I do that with my practice leaders who are building practices. Number 1, get away from 360, because 360 is a recipe, in my opinion, unless you've got fixed, 5 clients who are giving you a 300 to 500,000 and you're guaranteed that work. If you're not, 360 is a recipe for depression, burnout, and I'll get more brutal, but not a fan of the 360 model.
So survivability, you went through that to sustaining, and I love that you had talked about the money in the bank and how important that was for your business, for your life, for your stress. So that way, and it got you through COVID. But going from sustainability to scalability, what were some of the things that you did there?
Great. So once we establish that we have a business that is sustainable, my simple rule, and I think that this is something that has been drummed into me since I was a kid who always wanted something nicer. My dad would say, he'd point out to a few people and he'd remind me, he said, it's very easy to go up, but it's very hard to come down. So always think twice. And I think that's shaped by his own experiences and struggles. But it really made me think, I don't want to jeopardize a $500,000 billings to get to $1 million billings. I don't want to jeopardize my existing team to bring someone in who could be awesome, but will wreck the culture. So I had to figure out how to, I guess, bottle the magic or bottle the recipe, because I think at the time we had a team of 3. I was all client. I had a dedicated candidate recruiter, and then I had a dedicated resourcer, all in one office. So we were physically in the office. We all spoke the same language. We all knew the clients. And it was, by the time we were a $1 to $1.2 million business, 3 people, and, things were good. We could leave that as it is. And I feel like we could continue like that regardless of market volatility. There's a bit of a fallback position. But then I wanted more, more, more from the same thing, the freedom. Right, the freedom to do what I want, when I want, with whom I want. And that's more the, when I grew up, that's the story I want to paint for myself. So how do I do more of that? And I think that that's where revenue and profit enables all those other things. So what I did was I identified what are the things that were working. And for me, it always comes down to BD, but not BD in just making calls. So I started getting more strategic. Now, it may or may not work but here are a couple of things that I did. Number 1, in 2000, early 2000, I wrote a book called Switch, which then hit #1 bestseller on Amazon for job hunting and careers, which gave me a ton of credibility and gave me something to send to senior execs who were in between roles. And guess what? When they landed, they remembered me. I get a call back. I'll get an email back, right? Multiply that into 200 people. So the book really helped. Number two, and so this was early forms of content marketing before we had, right? I launched during COVID, I launched a course in which I had 70 CTOs, CIOs, sales VPs, and it was $1,000, but basically they got 12 weeks of coaching, weekly sessions, 6 hours of video. So it was another content product, solving the problem that, we had far more people looking for jobs. That then led into the podcast, which I have, the High Performance Sales Leader podcast. This is all BD, right? It's high value BD because it gives value. It's not just a take, because we all hate just, hey Ben, it's Pree, how are you? I've asked the rapport questions and then the inevitable, are you hiring? Are you looking? That can get soul destroying after a while, right? So the point is, how do I level up the conversation and have actually something to give? Because I do believe that givers get, but actually, you lead with the give. I remember this, a CEO of a mid-sized healthcare company took me for a walk through their facility and he said, Pree, I get calls from recruiters all the time, but nobody asks me, how are you doing, Gary? How are you? He said, they're all asking me whether I'm hiring, but heck, I've got a career too. Right? I'm like, yes, you do, Gary, right? So long story short is you got to look at the person. So the point with BD is not just calls and emails. It's not just, the next email outbound campaign. It's actually having, if I've got more time to do BD, how do I actually look at my ideal client profile, my personas in there, understand the pain that they have, and figure out that I become a value-added person 365 days a year to them. That, for me, is the highest value exchange, mutual value exchange, right? So if you're dealing with a performance issue in your team, you can talk to Pree because Pree is talking to 250 sales VPs who have the same problem. If your company has suddenly announced a job freeze or is announcing cuts and you're starting to feel nervous, you can talk to Pree because he's working with 20 other people going through the same issue. If you are looking for how to create a justification for a role that is hard to fill, you talk to Pree how to do that. Heck, I tell VPs, you don't have to be hiring through me, but if you want to do a confidential background check in my niche, I have notes on 70% of people. I'll tell you what I know about them. I'll call in a favor so I save you from a bad hire. I'm here for you, Ben.
The Elite Recruiter Podcast has multiple summits coming up that you need to make sure that you are registered for. We have the AI Recruiting Summit 2025 coming up. And on top of that, finish the year strong. These two summits are going to help you move the needle, help you achieve your goals, help you achieve your dreams, and make 2025 the year that you started out and you wanted it to be. Make sure you get registered and also stay tuned. We got something cooking for you guys. Working on another project that you guys are going to absolutely love. All right. See you guys at the summits and see you guys soon. One of the things that I think you just hit on is like, so often we think of business development as like the emails, the calls, the marketing sequence. But you're sitting there saying like, I got to find a better way to say this. More ways to skin a cat. I love I had to get up for a second because I had to let my cat out the door because I didn't realize that they were in the podcast room. I normally kick them out, but all of a sudden, like halfway through, I heard a meow.
But I think they aren't hearing the skin a cat comment, right? So
they've heard it a few times, and maybe that's why they attacked me last night. But like for just people listening, like you've done all these different things, but like high value BD, percentage wise, what's the impact on your guys' business from those?
I think percentage wise, when I look at if we sign 2 new clients a quarter, sometimes, and this is in a difficult market, I'm not talking about, and that's through my BD. I would say 80% has come through high value BD, or actually 90% rather than, and 10% comes from the, are you hiring? I've sent them a message. They're like, yeah, Pree, we're hiring. No, 90% of my clients have either, number one, they have, for everyone else, they've been a client in the past, right? Number two, they know someone that I know, but basically because I've taken an advisory coaching hat on a long time back, they know that a conversation with me will be 80% about value add to them and 20% about value add to me. And then lastly, I'll say past clients, common relationships, a lot of people that you get to know through the podcast. So I'm a big fan of podcasts because I realize that I am standing on the sidelines of this amazing game that's playing out. So I have visibility and access to everyone in the field. So my job in my podcast is my podcast is not about recruiting. My podcast is about being a high performance sales leader because I know so many of them. And I'm in those conversations and recruiting conversations. So I want to capture that wisdom, that story, that struggle. So through the podcast, through my LinkedIn posts and connections. And lastly, and I think every recruiter should do this, is that a long time back, I realized that I had far more to offer than just a resume, right? Than just a resume. Yeah.
Let's talk about that in a second. I want to jump back to this podcast. I'm a huge fan of telling people like, hey, podcast is a killer BD thing. Like, it is a tool to get into doors. It's a tool to like open relationships, way better than hey, can I help you with a job? But here's the thing that I think a lot of people like struggle with on just a thought process. And real quick, podcasting is a long game.
Yes.
But how did you flip those podcast conversations into clients?
I'll give you the example, then I'll make my point. I was talking to a client. I was talking to about someone who I had a client. There was a prospect who I had called and messaged for at least 12 months, 3 to 4 occasions. And it was always, we've just filled a role. We're not hiring for 6 months, to, hey, would you like to be on my podcast? And he said, yes, I'd like to be on your podcast. Right? I said, I've got the collection. And, these are high performance sales leaders from some of the best tech companies, right? So AI companies, cloud companies, your top cloud 100. So I said, would you like to be on it? He said, yes, I'd like to be on it. We're having a conversation about him. What are his frustrations? Because one of the things I tell them is that this podcast is going to be, number one, a great career resource for you. It's going to build your credibility within your organization. Number two, it's going to build credibility outside of the organization with clients, partners, and future employers. And number three, it's going to build credibility with people who want to come and work for you. And he said, at this time, one of the things we're really struggling with is attracting talent. And I said, tell me more. Right? And I said, and this was verbatim, I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with current efforts, right? Your current recruiters. And he said, 3. And I just instinctively, in my problem solving mode, said, would you settle for a 7? He said, that would be amazing. And that was done. We've billed $150,000 with that client. But my primary intention is not that. My primary intention is just to get to know the person, to get to understand who are they, where did they want to go, what's preventing them from getting there in their careers. And yes, through that, they realize this guy's not selling me, right? In fact, they get to know me and the access that I have today, right? I had the identity before I had the access. Really important, right? I do have 300 VP relationships with some of the best tech companies. But even when I had 3, I still was behaving like one.
You've had to go from identity shift from, not being a recruiter to being a recruiter, and then from being an average recruiter to being a coach, a consultant. Was it just like the desire to change? What was that magic shift or that magic time period where you went like the identity clicked?
I realized that 8 out of 10 people don't like recruiters, because recruiters are your best friend when you're hiring and they don't want to know you when you're not. I think that we have earned as an industry a bad reputation because of transactional, desperate recruiters, which is why the Pinnacle Society, it just stands like this shining light amidst the noise of, transactional recruiting who are trying to cut fees and do everything possible to get the deal, right? So I think people know when they see someone who is long-term versus short-term, who is exchange of value versus one-way value, right? And just say that people figure you out pretty quickly. And that was the main shift. But beyond the shift, it just felt a lot better because I know I have so much more to offer than just a resume, right? So I've got insight, I've got connections, I've got advice, I've got best practices, and I can help you with your career, help you achieve all the goals that you want. And this was something I learned as a sales leader in a Fortune 100 was this: if I help my manager get his goals, I'm far more likely to get my goals. If I help my team achieve their goals, I'm more likely to help achieve my goals. That's the easier way. The hard way is just to achieve my goals at the cost of everyone else. It's not just being a good human, but it's also being a smart human, because you end up with the win, but with many other winners around you, right? So, yeah.
I love that shift. So like we've talked about going from survival to survival to scalable, and that shift right there. But you've also talked about like the 3 pillars of having $1 million desk. Let's get back to that a little bit, because I've been having fun doing a deep dive on you.
Yeah. Absolutely. So one quick thing I'm going to say on scalability is read the book 10x is easier than 2x, right? If you tune out from everything that I've said, go get the book by Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan and listen to it again and again and again and figure out what your 10x future is. So for me, I went from, let's say, the 150, 200K billings to the 1.5 to $2.5 million billings. That was a 10x shift. And when you look at your next 10x shift, your previous 10x shifts, I went from 1 client to 10 clients. So I know how to get to 100 clients, right? We've now worked with maybe 300 clients. I wish it was all concurrently, but I'm just saying the point is there are 10x shifts, and because 2x thinking is lazy. 2x thinking is I'll make a few more BD calls, whereas there is no way so for example, I'm figuring out how to go from a $2.5 million desk to a $25 million business, right? Without borrowing money, without compromising sustainability. So I will not burn my cash reserves to do that. So, that's when the next stage comes. The only way I can do this is, and this is what I'm going to say, this is whether you're stuck at 200K, 300K, 500, 800, 1. You've got to be able to know what is the 20% that is vital, that is critical for you to do, and what's the 80% that you can delegate and elevate others. That's EOS language. But basically, how do you get other people to do the 80% that you shouldn't do, so that I can be the coach, the advisor, the mentor, and build my relationships at scale, not only one-on-one, but one-to-many, through podcasts, through really good LinkedIn content, and then basically bring that together. So number 1, more BD, less recruiting, less research. That's my formula, right? More BD, more strategic BD, which is the one-on-one, more calls. But the thing is, when I make calls to people, they pick up the phone. When I leave voicemails, it's not 100%, but it's 3 times more than when they didn't know who I was, right? I don't have to surprise people. I can send a text and say, hey, Ben, do you have 5 minutes to have a conversation today or tomorrow, this afternoon or tomorrow? And 7 out of 10 times, I'll get a text back and say, hey, Pree, I can take a call at 4 p.m. And I'm going to get someone who's expecting a call and will have a meaningful conversation.
And that's many times because of the seeds that you've been planting for the
yes
for the previous years.
That's correct. But even if nothing else, number 1, do more strategic BD, which is top of funnel, which is you've got your Dripify, you're adding 100 connections a week at scale. Number two, make sure that you're putting high quality LinkedIn posts, 2 to 3 a week that study people who do it well. That's the best hack. Study people who do it well. And there's no shortage of information today. There's maybe just a shortage of attention to learn how do I do this well? And then combine that with calls. Call the people you know, call the people who know you, call the people who will recognize the companies you call the competitors. Basically relationship or relevance. If you can spend 70% of your time on the relational axis, I know someone who knows someone, I work with this person there, and on the relevance axis, I worked for a competitor, I solved a public sector critical hire, you're always going to have credibility or relational equity that will give you the probability of a higher response. So number one, focus on BD. Number two, hire someone overseas at a fraction of the cost. So back then, I had to wait for 6 months to hire someone locally. Today, I have 3 incredible remote team members. I basically got people who are very experienced, so I don't even have time to train them. I did it wrong by actually going and hiring people that I had to train, and it was brutal. It was death by 1,000 cuts. It was like, oh, only I can do this. I should have done it myself. I suck at hiring. But I then read the 10x is easier than 2x author. He's written a book called Who Not How. That is, again, gold for recruiters. Take these 2 or 3 books and just read them and do yourself a favor. And so I then only hired remote team members who've done this for 5+ years. And I don't even interview them. I test them first. The test is the interview. Give them a job and say, I'm looking for an account executive with, DevOps or whatever, go and get me 10 profiles. Right? And did you pick them because, what was your thinking that went into them? Now go and get me 50 profiles. How many questions do you ask? How fast do you respond? I can tell. And so my point is, delegate the things that are not essential. Delegate the 80% of stuff that you don't need to do. Number 2, the rest automate. Automate it, right? From Clay to Driftify and Lemlist, there's so much that you can do in terms of automating processes, right? So that if you delegate and automate the 80%, right, you can then accelerate what is left. You can have in the same week, really good LinkedIn posts, podcasts, and then you see 17 companies that people are at, 17 companies hiring where someone who knows, likes, and trusts you. Even a LinkedIn DM, you're going to get a 30% response, not 100%. Hey, Pree, yeah, let me connect you with this person. Oh, no, we're only internal at the moment, right? You go to competitors and you start looking familiar. Even automating a sequence, hey, we know a whole bunch of people in common, right? So then if you make 10 or 20 high quality BD calls a day because you've got a warm footprint, that is where you're going to get high quality assignments, high quality. And I wish, I would say that happens every day. No, I'm living in the real world too, right? But the difference with having strong relational equity in your niche with a couple of 100 people at minimum, and then thousands where you have, oh, he looks familiar. I've liked his posts. I've messaged him. I've gotten something in the email from him. Is that then a good year can look like 2.5 million and a bad year can look like 1.5. It's not 2.5 or 0 because you've gone from survival to sustainability to scalability. And even if you aren't as scalable as you were back in 2022, where everyone felt like King Kong, you still have a business.
And with you in the back and the money that you have in the bank, it also gives you that internal confidence that, a client can smell it when you need it.
Absolutely. Even my own team, when we've now had a situation where the client at the last stage, this happened yesterday, it was 120 base, and they said, no, it's 100. The hiring manager's given you the wrong information. And the hiring manager actually turned on me and he said, well, that's your words. That's not my words. I didn't say that. You know what? At the end of the day, I was like, that's fine. Let's move on and just keep moving on, because you can take the hits. You can't take the hits when you are emotionally exhausted, financially at risk, and completely drained, and you're like, I need for this to work out. That's a very difficult situation. And so what I would say again is that it is very hard to be a 360-degree recruiter unless you're, in staffing. But basically, if your client base and your job order intake is variable, it's very hard to live as 360. You've got to delegate and automate proactively.
We've covered a lot. Like, this has been an awesome conversation. I just don't, after this, I just looked up the time and I feel like time just magically disappeared from us. So in saying that, we're going to jump over to the quick fire questions. But before we do that, is there anything else that you want to cover or rehash or go a little deeper on?
I'll just recap. Number one, decide what you want from your life 3 to 5 years from now, and then figure out what's the best way to build a practice that is sustainable and then scalable. I will take a profitable $1 million practice any day over a $5 million business where I can't sleep. Number two, learn how to delegate. And if you failed, learn again, learn again, learn again. One of the benefits of getting in the Pinnacle Society is access to people who've got 80 different pathways and learning. I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room. I want to be around the smartest people in the room so that I can learn something and I can come back and try. So after every Pinnacle conference, this is like a great Pinnacle plug, but every conference, I'm coming back with 3 to 5 things I'm going to try. And when you've got a little money in the bank, you're not afraid to fail. We tried it, didn't work. And so we work in 90-day cycles. Sorry, I should have said that. Work in 90-day cycles, pick 1 or 2 projects, have a crack, give it a go. If it doesn't work, you're learning. I was listening to Diary of a CEO, and Stephen Bartlett said something which I absolutely loved. And he said, failure is feedback. Feedback is knowledge. Knowledge is power. Just keep getting stronger through the feedback loops.
I love that.
Yeah. And then basically learn how to delegate and learn how to automate. Identify the 20% you should spend time in, delegate and automate the rest. That's all I had to say. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, because, you are out there constantly. Like, I see you online, I see you on LinkedIn, which is awesome. Like, you do a way better job writing stuff than I do. I just have word vomit sometimes. But but in saying that, with you being so visible, like, if you had a brand new recruiter that was coming to you and said, like, hey, I see that what you've done, you did a complete career shift. I think I could do this too. I'm just jumping into the recruiting chair. Never have been one before. What's the number one piece of advice that you give me to succeed?
Number one, slice your day into 2, into BD and recruiting. Do not start recruiting until, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Number one. Number 2, get as many high quality jobs as you can and get some runs on the board. As soon as you get a few more jobs, go and hire a virtual resource who will at least take list building off you. Pay 50% more and get an experienced person rather than someone you're going to train. And then, quarter to quarter, look at how quickly can I delegate and how quickly can I automate. And then as you do that, you basically need to start building your LinkedIn connections and your LinkedIn content. 2 quality posts a day. Just follow 10 people who do it well and imitate their posts. If they've got a picture of themselves with a bit of a survival story, go to my profile. I'm a learner. I try it. And then I see which posts resonate and which don't. Right? So you then become familiar. The people you're connecting with, LinkedIn will show it to them. When you DM them, they're more likely to respond to you. And that's how you just create a flywheel of delegation and automation, quarter in, quarter out, and warmth and familiarity of relevance and relationship.
And I always love when it's somebody that I've never dealt with before because of content on LinkedIn. They're like, hey, how's it going, Benjamin? I know you. And I'm like, uh-oh. Like, in a good way, but it's just like, oh, cool. That's awesome. showing up all the time. But same question though. Like you're sitting down with an old dog that's been around for 2 decades. They're asking you for advice. What's a piece of advice would you give them?
I love that pivot, by the way. I know a lot of recruiters who have been doing it for a long time and their relationships have retired, or they were getting by in the past where, talent acquisition wasn't so active in their account base, and now they are. And I would say take stock of the value that you bring to people, right? So that is number one, assess the value. And there is so much value that you can add to people, right? And so for me, I'm going to be a force for good, however that shows up, right? Secondly, draw that relationship relevance quadrant, 2x2 relationships. Do I know them? So for every one person say at company A, there are another 10 people who know that person. So I may not know Chris Walker, but Chris knows Ben. So when I call Chris and just say, I've worked with Ben, I know Ben, I'm going to get a better response. And so if you as an old dog, you should know 100 people. Otherwise, I don't know how you survived in this business. That gives you relational familiarity with 1,000 people because everybody knows 10 people, right? So the point is, don't tell me that, out of 1,000 new people, you can't find another 5 or 10 clients. So basically, relational equity is the best thing that an old dog has. Number 2 is relevance. Have you solved, if, for example, in my case, it's certain types of companies. So when I go to other companies who recognize the company name, the logo, if I recruit for, let's say, for example, an Amazon Web Services, everybody recognizes. So you've got the big logo, right? That gives me high credibility with 50 other companies. So basically, I'm always trying to do BD, whether it's tactical BD, because I'm not spending all my life on books, courses, and podcasts. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a business. It's a lot of tactical BD, but I'm doing it using either someone that they know in common or a company that they recognize. Any old dog can maximize that if they stop hugging the tree, which is the depression around what's happened to the existing clients, and start figuring out, okay, who are the next 300 people that I can speak to?
I love that. And you've been part of the Pinnacle Society for a while. What does the Pinnacle Society mean to you?
To me, it just means a genuine community where, you get to give and get and just be authentic, be yourself, but also great human beings who have done great things, right? Basically, you'll see every kind of story. And we have fellow, people who are going through survival, sustainability, and scalability all in different seasons. So it's not like I've permanently been, none of these 3 stages is permanent. Let me just say that, right? We had 2021, 2022 was an amazing year for most recruiters, right? At the cost of being, I took a whopping profit that we had and I invested it. That wasn't my first time investing, but that has 3x since. So instead of a 1-year runway, it's given me a 3-year runway. So, get good financial advice, but basically take the big months and invest. I still got the trip to Europe with my wife. I've still had time to live. I only work 9 to 5. I don't work on weekends. But because I've been able to invest in sustainability before scalability, when scalability is not working for me, I can fall back to I'll still be happy to finish the next 20 years as a, $1 to $1.5 million business, but that's not my goal. I will keep pushing forward despite the market, geopolitical tensions, but I can wait another 6 months if I have to wait. I don't have to, get the next and the next. So that's my point.
I love that. You've talked about books a lot. Is your favorite book right now that 10x is better than 2x?
Absolutely.
Favorite tech tool? You've mentioned a few. Do you have a favorite?
No, I'd just say that, I cannot underscore the importance of LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, not just for sending connection requests and making posts. We are key people of influence. We are key people of influence in our niches. You can only build familiarity at scale through LinkedIn. That's the one to many. And even my podcast traffic comes through LinkedIn, because that's where they get to know that this guy's got a podcast.
For this podcast, that's where it comes from, LinkedIn too.
Yeah.
So, you've had a lot of lessons that you've had to learn. Recruiting's hard. Like, you're getting punched in the face all day long. Like, it's all sorts of stuff happens in the recruiting world. What is one of the hardest lessons that you had to walk through outside of the ones that you've already chatted about?
Okay. This sounds really pessimistic. I feel like every client, every candidate, and every person will let you down at some point of time. So I realized that I am enough by myself, meaning that even if I lost everything and I go back to being a solo, I'm still good enough. And that allows me to engage with clients, candidates, and my team members from a place of overflow and adequacy. And I think that inventory of who I am, what value I can add to the world, is what will sustain you through all the madness that seems evolving either at a geopolitical level or in your account patch or with your A-grade researcher, recruiter who didn't show up and has suddenly gone AWOL. It's like, what the hell? So, yeah.
Well, because you're part of Pinnacle and because you're so visible online and with what you've been doing billing wise, with the great years, the lean years, still like freaking incredible. I'm sure you get a lot of questions like, hey, what's the BD secret sauce? Or how'd you start a podcast? Or like, what's the secret message that you're sending to people that's actually getting the return? Or what's the script of the phone call that, or what are you actually saying on a text message? Like, you're probably getting all those questions. Is there a question that you wish a recruiter would actually ask you, but normally never does?
I think we've answered it in this session. I think that basically, how do you survive in this industry? Because a lot of people don't. Because if you figure out how to survive, then you learn how to build a sustainable business. And if you can build a sustainable business, you can choose to scale if you want to or not.
I love that, Pree. Pree, for anybody that's listening and they want to follow you so they can like maybe see your LinkedIn post or something of that nature, what's the best way that they could follow you?
Just on LinkedIn, Preet Saka.
And I'll have that in the show notes. And before I let you go, is there anything else that you want to share with the listeners?
I just want to say that I think recruitment has been the greatest personal development opportunity that I've ever had. And it's really critical that you elevate yourself and the value that you add, because playing from a level 10, the give-get and the influence that you have is so much different from playing from a level 2, 3, or 4. And if nothing else, that identity shift, work on that this weekend, work on that and send me a message on how to work on that identity, because you need to just take stock of who you are and what you can do for others before you take something from them. Yeah.
I love that. Well, Pree, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. Like, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. I'm glad that we finally got the chance to make it happen. And one of the cool things about sitting down with you for the 2 times we've met is like how real you are in person.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. You know what? I'm so glad that we've done it. I love the fact that you've built this podcast. It is the best and it's back at you. You're real. And I feel like we could just talk for hours. So thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you. And for the listeners out there, like, you know what? Take the advice from Pree. I mean, he just like walked through literally the game plan of going from like 0 to $1 million and $2 million desk. He walked through the game plan of like what you actually need to do to grow your business. But he also said one thing at the very end: reach out to him. One of the most important things that I've seen with like a lot of these top billers and big businesses is the identity shift and how they've had to change and how the mindset operates and how they can put in the same amount of work as us. But what are the things that they've done different to make those changes and make those changes exponential over time? And that's one of the things that I absolutely just love about recruiting is at the end of the day, like, you could be one placement away from changing your life. You're one placement away from changing somebody else's life. And that's the beauty of this business. So I want you guys to keep crushing it. Make 2025 your year. And I'll see you guys soon. Attention recruiters. Sourcewhale has exciting news. Starting July 30th, You can try 2 powerful new AI tools for free. Inbox Agent is like an assistant in your inbox, drafting replies in your voice and automating follow-ups. Notetaker joins your calls, transcribes everything, and instantly creates AI-powered summaries that are automatically logged into your CRM. That means Sourcewhale handles the busy work while you focus on placements. Don't wait. Head to sourcewhale.com/free-trial to start your free trial.